This is the Creative Endeavor Podcast, the podcast bringing you inspiring stories from creative professionals from around the world. It's real conversations with real artists. And I'm Andrew Tischler. What a blast it is to have your company here once again. Welcome to the studio. Now, in this conversation, I'm talking to John Darley, who's an artist based in Utah in the United States. I've been following John online for some time, and I'm blown away by his work. This guy is an incredible painter, but you would be surprised to know how he creates some of these works. At first, I thought I was looking at some oil paintings with a really interesting technique, but then upon closer inspection, I realized he's using egg tempera for a lot of his iconic works. They're so intricate and exquisite, they look like they were embroidered. These fine little lines of color stitched together to make beautiful forms, faces, figures, and scenes. Now, John's portraits capture the essence and the life of his sitters. There's something that comes through that goes beyond just an image. You'll have to see his work to see what I mean. He can be found on Instagram at John Darley Art and also on his website, johndarley.com. That last name is spelled D-A-R-L-E-Y. I wanted to ask John in this conversation all about his art and how he creates it, a little bit of that technical talk that a lot of folks seem to enjoy, but I also wanted to ask him about his story, where he started, how he built this into a business, and how those first big breaks came about to where he could finally support himself and his family as a full-time artist, and not only survive, but thrive. Now, before we get stuck into this episode, I just need to let you know about something pretty cool. You're listening right now to the audio version of the podcast, but if you want to see the video version of this podcast and the rest of my podcast, and you can find that right now on Tish Academy. Simply go to tish.academy and you can see myself and John Darley coming to you from our studios. John's going to share some of his work. We cut in images of his paintings as he's describing them, so it really is a visual feast. You won't be disappointed. So make sure you check out the full video version at Tish Academy, and that link will be in the top of the show notes. All right, I'm going to get out of here and let John take over. Let's get stuck into this. I'm excited. Are you? Oh, I'm so pumped. This was a great conversation. Here he is. This is John Darley in the Creative Endeavor. John Darley, welcome to the Creative Endeavor Podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you here. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me. It's going to be great.
I cannot wait, man. I've been following your work for a little while now on the socials, as I've been following a lot of different artists as we do these days. It's
Right.
kind of frustrating, I must admit, because I'm looking at these tiny little images of your paintings. But what I can gather from looking at some of these images is they're exceptional. You have a particular technique as well that I'm looking forward to getting into in this conversation. But it's almost like they almost look embroidered, some of your paintings. It's really quite
Oh,
beautiful how you put it together. Before we geek out about the art, which I'm really excited about, talk to me about your art journey. I would love to hear like how this started. I've read a little bit on your website, just the briefest bio that I think I've ever read on an artist's website.
yeah,
So
yeah.
tell me a little bit about
Well,
yourself and how you got into this.
do you ever read artist websites and then it's like they're talking, it's written like a reporter's telling everybody about the artist and it sounds, but the artist is, writing their bio down probably, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so yeah, I should probably be a little bit more open on my artist bio. Um, but I don't know. I like talking, but I don't like writing about why I do what I do or things like that. I
Yeah,
should probably do better with that. But yeah, uh, art. How did it get started? I was listening to a podcast with you, and your father's an artist, correct?
that's right. Yeah, he's a sculptor.
That's very cool. Yeah. So I mean, I grew up kind of like that. I grew up in my mother's an artist. My grandfather was a musician. There's a lot of support behind it and just a general sense of creativity in my family, which was supported and nurtured and encouraged. I think it all started, when I was in Florida. I lived in Florida for a while, and it was a wild place, really cool, lots of alligators. And I just started like carving stuff. I
Yeah.
remember this like white chalk type stuff, just kept on carving and making, animals and different little sculptures. And I just loved it. I've always been just the kind of person who just gets just obsessed with stuff, just my ability to stay focused on it seems far more than most people would. And I would just really like days and hours would go by, and I would just carve these little stone. It was like this chalk substance. I don't even know what it was, but then I quickly got into wood, and I loved carving these little animals. But I went from Florida and then I moved to Utah, where I am now. It's a great place. Um, when I was maybe 6, 7, maybe 8. Can't really remember, but that it was a period of constant transition. It sounded, from what I can remember from the podcast with you, it sounded kind of similar. You just transitioning all the time. Went to tons of different schools, like 5 elementary schools, and art is a great thing that kids can control, and I think that's why a lot of kids gravitate towards it. Because
Hmm.
when you're a kid, there's just not a lot you can control, and so my family went through like a brief, very difficult economic time, right? Where I didn't really know what was going on because I was too young, but it took a while for them to get back on their feet. So we were, living at different relatives' house, a lot of commotion, a lot of stress. And when you're a little kid, you can't like run away. There's no fight or flight. You can't run away from the situation. You can't really fight a situation. You just kind of
Yeah.
absorb it.
Hmm.
Um, but art is something that you can always go to and you can just get lost in and you can have control over it, right? And I think there's probably a ton of kids or young people or even adults who find, gravitate towards art because of that similar situation. But that was kind of my initial starting point. It was something I could control, it was something I could do, and it's something I could just get lost in because I've always been kind of a person that, I just bite onto something, I just don't let go, and I just get really into stuff for whatever reason. Um, and so, yeah, I did that through when I was young, transitioning a lot, did it in high school. I think I was about 12 or so when, I thought this is probably what I'm going to do, even though I didn't really want to do it. But I could just see that that's probably what I was, it just felt like what I was probably going to do. I did flirt with a couple different career paths, but
Hmm.
ultimately, this is where I ended up. And I studied accounting for a little while.
Oh, wow.
You know, I was like on the verge of enlisting in the military, and I met my wife, and she was not down with that at all. But she was down for painting and artwork, right? So,
Okay.
so that really helped. So yeah, I just went through high school, through that transition, all the way up to uh, my 20s, where you have to figure out what you want to do with yourself, right? It was about I took art seriously when I was 22 is when I started seriously studying, and that's where it
Mhm.
took off from there.
On your website, I noticed a name come up under where you studied. There's a couple of different things there, but Hein Atelier came up there as well. So you studied for a little while with Jeff Hein.
Oh yeah, Jeff's my boy. He's great. Loved studying with him. Um, yeah, he was. So yeah, so my mom was a painter. I guess if you want to get further into
Yeah, let's
how it
do
started,
that.
my mom,
Let's do
my,
that. Yeah.
my sure, sure. So my mom was a painter, and she was studying when I was little, right? So I'm the youngest of six, or excuse me, well, technically six, because I lost a brother. I never met him though. But so five living, I suppose. And there's a 6 year gap between me and the next youngest. And my mom was studying when we were in Florida, and she was trying to learn how to become a painter.
Mhm.
And her career really took off when we moved to Utah, partly out of necessity. My dad had a great job. He did good work, but I think his employer was doing something sketchy. I don't really know all the details, but he had to quit. And
Right.
he was pretty confident on his ability to find, some new work, but it didn't pan out like he would have hoped. And, we went through a year or two worth of savings, and he did get a job, but it wasn't, it was like, we're still looking. You have a job, but you're still looking for another job. And so, yeah, we're popping around different relatives' homes. And so when we went from Utah, we went and lived in my grandfather's basement, who was a musician, right? And he had a very similar story, in that, or of struggle, in that he grew up in Wellsville, Utah, was a farmer, and he decided he didn't want to be a farmer, and he went, made friends with a janitor at, it's called the Tabernacle. It's like a church in Wellsville.
Mhm.
And he just kept on practicing and practicing. And I mean, he grew up through the Depression. His mother died from the Spanish flu. And he
Wow.
made it work, right? Like
Yeah.
his whole career was music. Um, and he had some different things. I mean, there was World War II. He was a chaplain. He went to Japan and all that. But overall, his whole career was playing, teaching, and composing music. And
Mhm.
and eventually, it was like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir organist, right? Which is, I think, the world's biggest organ, right? So if you're an organist, I mean,
Oh, wow.
it's the dream organ, right? Anyway, so we got plugged in there, and then so I saw my grandpa and what he was doing, and we lived in his basement, and his organ was in that basement. He would come down and he'd practice and play it. And then there was my mom, and I was watching her, and she was always creating paintings, and she started doing lots of portrait paintings, and she got plugged into doing a lot of official portraits, I guess you could say. So for some really prominent families in Utah, like the Eccles and different state judges, and she made a fair amount of money doing that. And because we were poor, she was always like, trading things for me, right? Um,
Mhm.
I got braces, through her trading her artwork.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, I mean, you can do it, right? Matter of fact, I still do that. I think I traded a small portrait painting for a garage door, which was great. I don't know what, I'm not exactly sure what the sales tax is in that situation, but I'm doing the don't ask, don't tell scenario, where I don't really know, but I'm hoping we're saving some sales tax there between us both.
No
But
doubt.
she would, right? So she would do stuff like that all the time, and so maybe that's why I take a whack at it now today. But she was, and I didn't like school much because I was always transitioning and going to these new places. And Utah culture, I love it in Utah, but it's very different from Florida, right? And so I was a little kid, and I was in these like affluent neighborhoods. They're fairly wealthy, but I wasn't. So there's it was very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so I'd always pretend, you're sick. I'm like, oh, my stomach hurts or whatever. And I would go to her studio and I'd watch her. And I'd see all these, weird people come into this art studio. So it was like an apartment building, but just for artists. It was called the
Mhm.
Guthrie Building. And I loved them. I loved just people watching, and I loved watching what my mom was doing, and she would, give me supplies to do my own thing as well, and I loved the smell of it. I loved everything about it. I thought it was so cool. So I really enjoyed that. And then when I was did go to school and was at school, I was always drawing, right? Um, and so, I'm popping around from place to place, and then I go, I get a little bit more serious about it, a little bit more established. My family finally got on their feet and were able to buy a home. Yeah, and eventually stability happened, and that was great because then it was, I was able to think about the future a little bit more, and what am I going to do for a living? How am I gonna potentially provide for a family,
Right.
and I
Right.
was always hesitant to do it, because I don't know where you can tell me if you felt this way. I don't know where I got this idea. Nobody ever told
Mm.
me this. I just, for some reason, thought that I wasn't ever going to be able to get married if I became a painter for whatever reason. I thought I
Hmm.
couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine any woman wanting to marry a painter, and I really wanted to marry a
Really?
beautiful woman, right?
Okay.
Like I really wanted to marry a beautiful woman, and I did. I did.
Yeah.
My wife is just awesome. But for some reason, when I was a little kid, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about this when I'm like 12, right, which is crazy to
Okay.
me. But I was like, I'm never gonna, they're never gonna do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
But you grow up and you realize that's not the case. And so, I went through high school, and I got a little bit more into, sports and some other things. I love playing sports. There's something about that I, it was a real great outlet, kind of like painting. Um, and then I went and served a mission for my church as a missionary, which was wild and really cool because you're
Mhm.
talking to people every day who you'd probably never talk to otherwise,
Yeah.
and seeing like these different walks of life, and talking to people about like really deep stuff, right? Like what's the meaning of life,
Oh,
right?
wow.
On a
Yeah.
daily basis.
Yeah.
And you aren't watching TV, you
Hmm.
aren't watching the news. And when
Hmm.
you I mean, just take the TV and news aspect out of your life,
Oh, it's
you
toxic.
have so much time to think, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
And so like I remember just like laying in my bed at night and just, first of all, I was always overviewing my life, like just kind of crawling over it and being scrupulous, and thinking about what I'm glad I did, what I should have done better, and then like where I want to go. um, and it was there that I was really considering painting. And for some reason, I was also considering, I was just kind of testing things. I said, I knew, you could try to get a more stable career, or I knew that there was this thing that I loved doing. I seemed to have an aptitude for it. I knew it was probably a difficult path. Um, and so, but the question was like, how did I want to fight, right? Do I want to fight, in life with both my hands, a really hard fight, or did I want to um, have something, an easier fight, with, with a weak punch, something you're not really into, right? And so I tried accounting a little bit, which was horrible. It was just awful. Um, and quickly realized that that wasn't a way to go. But then um, she was painting. She's like, you should pursue painting. You really should. And so there's the unfortunate problem though that I noticed a lot of painters didn't make a lot of money,
Hmm.
and I just knew that that wasn't an option for me. So what I did was, I kind of asked around, who, and my mom suggested I talked to Jeff Hine, who you mentioned, and I talked to him. I was like,
Sorry, John.
how do you make it?
John,
Oh,
just
yeah.
just let's just sorry, just to give us let me just cut in here. What round about what time is this? What year is this that you're talking to Jeff Hine and kind of thinking these things? Just to give us an idea of the timeline here.
I first talked to him in 2008, maybe
Right.
2009, briefly,
Okay.
and then I popped back in and had a much more serious conversation
Mm.
in 2011 or 12,
And how old are you at this
or,
point?
21 or 22,
Right. Okay.
on the second one, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and he just, he just said, it's not complicated. Um, you on how you make a living, you just have to be good, right? Which I
That old
laugh at now,
chestnut. Yeah.
right? I was like, oh yeah, right, okay, because I've seen plenty of painters who are really good,
Mhm.
who don't seem to have the same fortune as others, or what they probably would have wanted. Um, but I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. um, and so for a while, so he said, why don't you come study with me in my studio, drop out of college, right? Great idea.
Great idea.
And I and so I that's what I did, is I just dropped out, and started studying with him, and all the while I'm pursuing a love interest of mine, which is my current wife, and we're kind of talking it out and trying to see what's going on, and what would work for both of us. And I'm super super poor, like have I don't have any money, and I think it was around, I talked to Jeff, and then I went and I was starting to study with him, and then I left to North Dakota. Do you remember in 2012 there was like that big old oil boom?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a big resource
Did you?
like pump in a way.
Yeah, there was like a
Yeah.
huge oil boom in I th you know I think it was they learned a new way of drilling, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
something like that, shale oil, or
Hmm.
but anyway, so the whole country was just going to North Dakota to
Wow.
try to make a living, and make some money, because you could. And I didn't have any skills, that where I could make any significant money to get married, which is what I wanted to do. Um, so I went out there and I lived on a man camp,
Mhm.
which is like essentially a bunch of trailers put together in the middle of a dirt field. And you live in these like little tiny trailer dorms. And it was in the middle of a dirt field. And this town was maybe for like 8,000 people, and there's like hundreds of thousands of people there. And they're all men. And it was the Wild West, right? But it was also a great time to think, like, what do I want to do? I was working construction out there, and I, it wasn't planned this way, but it just so happened that my wife, she ended up getting a job working for the same company I was, and she came out and lived on a man camp with me. She was my fiance at the time. We had
Mhm.
like separate rooms, we all had our little dorm. But she came out and she got a job as a cook, and I was doing construction. And that's where we had like literally no distractions other than a dirt field and like a Walmart and a Dairy Queen. And again, back to that whole opportunity, place where you have time to think idea.
Mhm.
We talked about it a ton, right? Like, what direction do we want to go? And she just kept feeling comfortable, and confident in the idea of pursuing art, right? And
Mm.
I proposed a few other things, but again and again, she was like, I think you should pursue painting. I think you should do that. Um, and if it wasn't for her go ahead, I probably wouldn't be doing it. But she did give me that go ahead, and man, I just went 100% after it, just as hard as I could. And I studied with Jeff, and I was with him for a good while. And it was great because you get to see somebody working in the studio. You get to see, all these little details that you probably miss. If you're watching like a YouTube video or taking a class at a university, you get to
Mhm.
see somebody working with clients and all of that. And you get to see their strengths and their weaknesses, and you get to see, the whole person, which is
Amazing.
quite a revealing thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And really, really useful. And I'm a big proponent for those apprenticeship models. I think
Yeah.
they're great.
Well, he
And
would
so,
be
so, so
he'd be a great
that's
one
where
to
it went.
he'd be a great one to study with, wouldn't he? I mean, Jeff, I'm a huge fan of Jeff Hine. Shout out to Jeff. But tell me about that. Like how was that structured? Because from the telling of your tale here, this sounds a lot like it would have been just kind of you and him in the studio. Are you kind of coming on board here? Yes, you're learning the craft, but you're more or less an apprentice. Is he getting you to help him with some of his work? Are you working on your own projects while this is going on? Like, how did that all work? Like, run me through like maybe a bit of that day to day, because that's something. Just personally, I feel like this is something that I missed out on. I went to one of those tertiary institutions. A lot of people know my story. I studied at a university and went to a kind of the academic route, which is, yeah, not advised. I wouldn't do it. If I had it to do over again, I would really much rather do it the way that you've done it. Because I didn't learn any skill or technique. It was all theory and it was pretty dry. But I'm just super curious as to how that all operated. So run us through that.
Well, yeah, so that's a great question. So he would refer to us as his apprentices. And it was very much so that way. He had his like main studio, right? And then he like crammed us in like a little tiny room, um, where we worked on, like cast drawings and still life drawings, and then the
Brilliant.
figure drawing. And the figure at first was like once every other day, but I remember kind of throwing a fuss about it, and he was accommodating, and then we had a figure every day, which I think it was really necessary and important.
Mhm.
Um, and so he would have his door open, and we would come in and watch him, or he would come and see what we're doing. See how we're working on our projects, and he had a system of, he would only instruct you on more complicated subject matter if you were able to show a proficiency in a less complicated subject matter, right? So, for example, your ability to see shapes, right? If you can do it, and you give us certain exercises to do, and you would try to get 5 in a row to show proficiency, and he would have a legitimate standard of perfection, right? Like when he
Mhm.
meant perfect, he really did. And if you got to like number 4, yeah, you'd be on your 4, or your fourth or fifth drawing, and you screwed up on your last one. You had to start the whole assignment over and do another 5. And
Wow.
it's debatable on whether or not that is the best way to go, but it was, for me, it was just the challenge, right? And I was up for it, and I didn't see a lot of people get all the way through it. And I saw a lot of people waste time, right? And just grind their gears. So I definitely don't think it was the best way to go for everybody. But I was up for the challenge, and I worked really hard to get a foothold in getting an ability to be able to create the stories that I want to create and now create. Um, but it was great. I loved it, and I'm grateful that he pushed me and took me there.
Mm.
And eventually I started seeing on the internet, people at the Grand Central Atelier, and their figure drawings were just incredible. They're studies, but they were incredible studies. And I kept on getting so irritated that they were so good. It made me mad. So eventually, I just figured I needed to go there and get my figure drawings to a level that I knew I needed in order to tell the stories that I do, and hopefully will continue to tell. And so I my wife and I, we took the leap and moved to New York and studied there.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, you're talking about telling stories, this ability to tell stories. I mean, there's there's something that comes through in your work, which is a beautiful narrative quality. And there's a few works in particular that I want to ask you about. But seeing as we can see this glimpse in your studio right now with the shot that I'm looking at, and I'm looking just over your shoulder, and I see this
Oh,
beautiful painting. Two figures in the painting. They're in the forest. Describe this painting for us, and then maybe walk us through, what's behind it. Of course, when you're looking at a painting like this, the viewer is going to bring all kinds of things to it. The story really does start to come out. But I'd love to hear your thought process there. And I just one more thing. For anybody listening to the audio version of the podcast, remember that you can find the full video version of the podcast on Tish Academy. Go to tish.academy and sign up there. And I make that available from the studio tier on up. So if you want to see the video version, make sure you go to Tish Academy and you can have a glimpse at some of the images that we're cutting in here and also have a glimpse at John's studio where he's about to tell us about this amazing painting. Go ahead, take it away, bro.
yeah. So this painting's called Bearing, and I painted it. Was it last year, I believe, last spring. And so the thing about this painting is it's one of those paintings where you just have to paint it, right? It's not,
Absolutely.
it's not terribly sellable. Like when I try to think of a collector for this painting, the ones that I have, anyways, I can't think of too many who would be interested. But I just said, collectors be damned. I'm painting this because it meant so much to me.
Mm,
So this is a painting of a woman. She's breastfeeding a baby. She's in the snow, and then there's a man on the far left corner who's walking away, and he's holding a rifle. And the idea behind this painting was for it to embody a feeling, I had when before my wife and I bought this home that we live in. Um, it was incredibly difficult, like extraordinarily difficult.
wow.
I mean, it was just so hard. We had our second child, um, and when we got back from New York from studying at GCA, we had like $1,500, and you know, we lived with my wife's grandmother and took care of her while we were trying to save some money again to build back up a little bit of a nest egg to buy a home. Um, but around 2020, you remember, I mean, the pandemic hit, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was stashing away commission money. And I got lucky with my commissions because I got back from New York, and I did actually that painting right there, which isn't for sale. My grandfather right there, that
Yeah,
one's mine. It's going to stay in the family. But I
brilliant.
did that painting, and I got a bunch of commissions out of that, just out of thin air, for like 30, 20, 10, like all quickly, so there was like what, $60,000 in a very short period of time, and then the ball kept on rolling. And so it really kept me in the game, kept me painting, which was awesome. But 2020 hits, and you know, home prices just start going up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
And so we had saved $50,000, and then I had another $40,000 coming in. And if you have a normal job, that's usually sufficient to for a down payment to get into a home.
Hmm.
Um, but if you're self-employed, and I don't know about you, Andrew, but like my tolerance, well, my tolerance for risk is all put in my career path, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I don't borrow money. Like I don't have a credit card. The only money I've ever borrowed was for the home that we live in.
Wow.
And and so and so I wanted a real big down payment in order to make, be fairly conservative so that I can, you know, my risk tolerance is allocated towards my career, and taking risks on paintings that I want to paint, or stories I want to tell, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to being scared and then having to do things I don't really want to do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it makes
And
sense, man.
so,
Makes perfect
right,
sense.
right.
Absolutely.
Um, and so that painting though, we got back from New York and I worked for a while, and then we had our second son, and we were just looking at the home prices in Utah were just out of control, man. In 2 years, they doubled. They doubled. The
Whoa.
300,000 house is now a $600,000 house, and they haven't changed. They're still insanely high.
Yeah.
It's like I love people exploring the state that I'm just in love with. But man, I wish houses weren't so expensive. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So we are working so freaking hard, like so hard to be able to get a house. It was, and the pressure was just intense. And so my wife, had to go back into the work marketplace, into the workforce. And so, there's like, and then partly to get partly because we wanted to add to the nest egg, but also as a more like the mortgage company would look at me and they were wanting extra layers of guarantee that we'd be able to pay their monthly bill. And when you're self-employed, it's rough, man. Like
Yeah.
they're pretty scrupulous.
Yeah.
um and so we knew if she would got plugged in for 2 years, um at like a stable job, there might be a chance that we could
Mm.
get something plugged in and we could maybe outpace inflation. Um, and so what happened was she did that. She went back into the workforce, and I took care of my two children, which was like totally doable for the first year. But what happened was I just ended up not sleeping. Is what happened. I just kept on. I would start working when she'd get home at like 5 o'clock, and I'd go till 3, and then I'd wake up when the kids woke up. And man, dude, it just
That's
it
rough,
was
dude.
like it was the sleep deprivation that started
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
messing me up. And
Yeah.
I think when I look back on it now, I think it was like 100% chemical. Like
Hmm.
I think matter of fact, I learned later on that that's like a torture method, right? Like, that people use is to like not let them sleep. And I
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure was like in like a perpetual state of pain. Like it
Yeah.
didn't matter what was happening, just
Hmm.
being awake and existing hurt. It was painful.
Mm. Mm.
And on top of that, the pressure of like, is this our new life? Right? What are my in-laws gonna think? Like, what have I done? Like,
Hmm.
for look at this life that their daughter has. And
Mm.
and how and then like I'm also trying to deliver commission work in order to get to the financial point to get into into any home, right? Because people at this time are like, we looked at a home and somebody put $150,000 over asking price cash, right? And so and I'm self-employed, like I'm this artist, and there's these people who are coming from California, which I don't have anything against California. You're great. Everyone from California, you're fine.
Just stay
But
over
like,
there.
right? But they have like a huge buying
Yeah.
potential.
Yeah.
And so, I'm just thinking about what kind of life is my family going to have? What
Hmm.
does the future hold? And then on top of that, I'm trying to deliver these commissions just in order to not only save money but to survive, right? And and you know we looked at some houses, and we I had some commissions pan out, and then we had some investments pan out, which was a little added bonus. And then, we were looking at a house here in American Fork, um, and we like looked through it for 10 minutes, not even like half an hour. I know you were just looking at some property, but man, we just like went through the place
Mm.
and we just said we'll take it because it was literally the only house available within like a 50-mile radius,
I know
right?
exactly what that's like.
And I think actually the other asked offered more than we did.
Mm.
Um, but they went with us because they liked us better for whatever reason. And we paid. It was 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. It was like, I don't know, like a little over 300,000.
Right.
And now when we paid for it, it was close to 600,000,
Yeah.
right? Which is, I mean, it's just crazy,
It's insane.
just
It's
crazy,
insane.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but it's she we signed the papers, right? And the day we signed them, my wife quit her job, and I had like a great pipeline of commissions, and it was the best feeling in the world, man. It was
Awesome,
so
dude.
good. I loved
Awesome.
it. I
Let,
loved it so much.
let me
And
just reflect on what you're saying there though as well. Like this there's this thing. I'm a bit of a traditional guy. Um, I like to provide within our family unit, but I so get that pressure that you were feeling. And I went through this thing last year. Um, and I want to say, folks, if you're listening, please don't worry. You don't need to send me emails or anything. I'm all good. It's fine. But I've been kind of unwell since April of last year. And looking back now, I think the thing that did it, it's got to be stress, and the one thing
yeah,
that I have found particularly stressful and a bit of a strain on everything is this outside pressure that things that you can't really do anything about. And so I'd focus on that. Of course, it would affect sleep, all of this stuff. And what I realized was sometimes heaping more on your plate, trying to ask more of your body, trying to like really force your will upon the situation, it can be a recipe of disaster. Absolutely, you can
for sure.
overcome. And I just got in the mindset at the time where like, no, I'm gonna overcome this. I'm gonna wake up at quarter till 3 in the morning. I'm reminded of Jeff Hines, the podcast I did with him and talking to him about that. I was like Mr. Motivation. And I was gonna wake up at quarter to 3 in the morning. I was just gonna smash this thing out. And the wheels ended up falling off after
Yeah,
several months of that. And you because there's a certain level that yeah, you can sustain, but when it's coupled with, that stress on the daily, and it's like, I mean, we're in 2024. We don't need to go into like what are the causes of that stress. I don't recommend it, but turn on the news. Like there's a lot of stuff going on that can really take us out of that state that we need to be in to create our best. But man, I totally get that. What we've done though, and I've decided this year I'm trying a completely different philosophy. I'd love to hear what you think. But what I'm doing now is just going, no, I'm going to completely chill out. I'm going to completely just go with the flow pretty much on a daily basis. I have things that I need to get done. I'm going to focus there, just focus on service and not focus at all on numbers, on anything like that. And the other thing that's coupled with, we just sold the house that we're in, which I was under this massive weight of a huge mortgage. Like many people probably don't know, like, but I was trying to juggle like all of these things in the air. And financially, we were able to make it work. It was fine. But that pressure never goes away. And to the point where I was just like,
yeah,
you know what? Let's just move back to Lawrence, that little old town down south. Let's move back there. I'll get back into my old studio. Let's just buy an old little cottage and, do it up and live in that and see if we can get our mortgage down to less than half of what it is.
yeah,
I tell you, man, the day we did
absolutely.
that, the pain in my stomach left me. I'm feeling pretty good now. I've had that persistent knot in my stomach since April. And
Yeah,
it actually and it got so bad there, dude. It put me in hospital once. I was like,
yeah,
far out. Yeah, yeah, bad news. So I get the stress and pressure thing. And when you can get to this thing where you could just see over that hump, and then you're looking at that downhill slope. That's the best feeling ever, isn't it? It's the best thing
Yeah,
ever.
man. It's so funny because you said that. You said that you're having a bit of a health issue, and it was so interesting when as soon as I read that, I I I immediately estimated what everything you could kind of just told me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Which
I
is,
think a lot of people would
you're,
have. A lot of people were telling me, slow down, dude. Slow down. You're gonna break. You're gonna crack. But
right,
okay, well,
right. Because I can totally relate, man. I mean, I
yeah.
just definitely get it. And I mean, the thing is though, let me ask you this though. Like I wake up, well, I mean, this has always been like even when I was studying though, like I had weird stuff happen with my body,
Hmm.
right? Where I was starting to get sick, like my hands would go numb, and all this weird stuff. And I gained a ton of weight too, like just a ton. I've lost it now. But even still today though, I wake up at 4 in the morning whether I want to or not.
Oh
Like
wow.
I just wake up, and I have a hard time going to sleep, um for whatever reason. And I'm not stressed anymore.
Mm.
Like I feel like things are great. Well, I mean, we do have another baby coming, right? We have our number three.
Congratulations. Oh,
Right? So
phenomenal,
I
man.
I
Awesome.
definitely do think about that, and I do have some deadlines I have to meet. And it's a weird combination of I have obligations I have to meet,
Hmm.
and I have some things that are likely to pan out, and some things I hope will pan out, right? And
Hmm.
so I just attack them as I can. But yeah, man, that stress that can build up if you aren't careful, if you're self-employed, really in anything, and you're just trying to be a responsible person and care for your family and for yourself,
Hmm.
and not make your in-laws ashamed of you. You know, I mean, man, like
Yeah,
you got to
yeah,
it's a lot. But
yeah.
I would say it sounds like you're there where you learn how to deal with it, and you learn how to deal that aspect of art making or being self-employed in general, where
Yes.
you get better. And then for me, I've just kind of started to realize, I mean, panicking doesn't really solve problems. I don't think there's ever a problem in life where panicking helps, right?
Yeah. There,
Easier said than it's the
there's
truth.
actually there's a scripture I read the other day, and I want to share this with you. Let me just do a quick little Google here. Um, it's Philippians 4:7, and let me read this to you because I just love this, man. Like it's something that really kind of helps me. And because this is the thing, when you're concerning yourself, you're stressing yourself out, you're trying to force your will on the situation, you're not really fixing anything. And it's not that you lack those resources, you lack the resourcefulness to be able to just kind of tap into that and go with the flow, but also just trust
Yeah.
that it's going to be okay. Like you know what to do, you know what you have to do. But I love this. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving let your requests be known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. I love that little thing, dude. I mean that really helps me kind of just
100%.
get in that zone again where I'm just super chill and I can just kind of go, okay, you know what? It's all taken care of. It's all right. He's got
Yeah.
this. And so all I need to do is show up with everything that I have and let his will be done. So that's
I
just
can
me. And I know some of the people listening to
yeah.
this, they might not be in that space spiritually. That's all good. That's just my walk. And I know you're a man of faith as well. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
I just can't. I have to piggyback on that, man, because it's just too good. It's just
Mm.
too good because it's just so true. Like I cannot tell you. I mean, I was telling you, this painting you see here, like how it was
Yeah, yeah.
is an embodiment of that. at that very, very cold, unhospitable time in our life. And I don't know why I felt like I had to get it out, but I
Yes.
did. And, I'm hopeful that other people like yourself and other people who have dealt with a similar situation where there's an incredible amount of pressure and you look at them and you have zero idea what's happening inside, but
Yes.
it's a unbelievable war.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that to that scripture which you just mentioned, man, like I can't tell you how true that's been in my life, in my family's life, time and time again. I mean, like I was saying, how I kind of got lucky when I came out of school and like, you're like, God, it's time to make money, right? And it was when my wife, she came into this like small room I'm painting in, um, and shows me this pregnancy test, and she's like, "We're pregnant, right? We're gonna have a baby." And I just had that like shock of like, ugh, like what are we gonna do, right? Like I
Yeah.
mean, we have no money. I had a show in New York. had like, I had some, I got a little money from it, and I had some
Mm.
other, smaller commission work, but nothing significant, not like
Yeah.
family money. But literally a half an hour later, I hear that little ding email, and I look at it, and it was a commission for 30 grand, which, I mean, 30 grand
Dude.
is like, I mean, it's not like, I mean, when you're just out of school, man, and you have like no money, and your wife tells you she's pregnant, and you get a commission for 30 grand, you're like, wow, well, that's nice. Maybe there's some hope. And then I got a bunch more after that. And it really got the ball rolling, and it was literally right after she told me. It was about a half an hour. There's a half an hour time
Awesome.
period between the two. And
Awesome.
this house too, man, like the fact that a self-employed artist, um, and his wife were able to get into this home
Mm.
is just insane, and with a reasonable mortgage, mind you. Like,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
we're able. We aren't. It's not. It's. I mean, it's obviously still a lot of money, but it's not like we aren't being destroyed by it. And
Mm.
the amount of, I guess some might call it luck. I don't think it was, but the amount of things that
No, I don't
had to
believe in luck.
align,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
had to align for us to be here when
Hmm.
people from all over the country, or for whatever reason, coming here and trying to, start their families as well.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, dude, I told Jeff Hine about this. Like, I called him on, he called me, or I can't remember, but we were talking about it, and I told him how we bought this house. And it's the first thing he says is like, dude, someone's looking out for you.
Oh,
And I could,
fantastic.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And you know what? If you
Awesome.
talk to him again, like he'll tell you the same kind of miracles. And not only that, I don't know if you knew this, but there's a fair amount of artists around here. For whatever reason, there's a lot of artists in Utah. I don't know
Dude, I want
why,
to go to Utah.
but
There's a
but
bunch of you there, man. I think we got what we
yeah,
got Brian Mark Taylor's there, you're there, Jeff Hines
yeah,
there, and
yeah.
several others. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know of several in Utah. Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, here's another one for you to look up. Check out the sculptor Ben Hammond. He is,
Oh yeah.
yeah, he's just like literally like a few houses down from me.
Oh.
It's right. Yeah. I mean, I see him at church. I go to his house once in a while when I like am, panicking, because all these guys are older than me, like Jeff and
Yep.
Brian Mark Taylor, Casey
Hmm.
Childs.
Yep.
They all got like 15, 18, 15 or so years on me.
Mm.
Um, and so it's nice when you can go and like panic to somebody who's done something similar to what you've done. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But anyways, if you talk to these guys, I was talking to Ben, man, he like the amount of miracles that have happened in his life,
Hmm.
um, are incredible, right? And we talk about this. Like, I always, and that's the one thing. Whenever I, am feeling panicky, I go over there, and maybe I should start paying him as my therapist. But um, but he
Yeah.
always say the same thing, man.
Mm.
He'll be like, dude, just, you know, just do your best to, you know, just do your best to keep the faith, man. Like just
Yeah. Yeah.
stay with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's based off, his experience in his life.
Mhm.
And you know, I'm seeing why I've, Jeff has said similar things to me as well.
Mhm.
And as I'm getting older, I really understand why they keep on saying that. When you're young and you're panicking, if
Mhm.
you're young and panicking, you get advice like that, and you're like, like cop out, but
Yeah.
you get a little older, and you start to see how true that that can be.
Do you know what I think it is? I think it's the perspective of being able to look back and being able to track those past events and being able to see, hang on a second, I was worried then, but I made it through that chapter of my life. And then you start to stack these things. As a younger man, I was a lot more, I wasn't as resilient as I am now. And sometimes that faith that comes through, this is something that has to be exercised through these trials that we have. And then
Yeah,
you suddenly realize, oh, hang on a second, something's continuing to get me through. Um, which is extraordinary. Sometimes it you know, sometimes you are facing something that is just absolutely insurmountable. I have a friend right now who's really sick, really, really sick. And he might not make it. But, speaking to him, and every time I call him and talk to him, say, Steve, how you doing, brother? How's it all going? He's like, I'm
yeah,
fantastic. I'm absolutely fantastic. But he looks like heck. And it's like, no, how you really doing? He said, well, the body's not so good, but the spirit's awesome. I'm like,
yeah,
phenomenal, brother, phenomenal. And
yeah,
so having for me an older brother like that I can look to and just go, okay, that really helps put things in perspective for me. It's like that's some faith right there. That's some faith muscle. It helps me look at my own
yeah.
my own walk with a new perspective and go, well, hang on, what am I worried about? What am I complaining about? He's
Right,
got this, so
right.
just keep going. Yeah,
I mean,
interesting.
I
I'm
mean,
glad we went on this tangent.
right. I mean, to keep on the tangent,
Yeah,
unless you
yeah,
want to go
please,
somewhere
please,
else,
please. No,
because
no, no, please. We got lots to talk about. We got lots to talk about.
I mean, it's so that the model I used for right
Yeah.
there, that the man, right? That was my buddy.
Wow.
Who was he was, and I wanted to get him as the model for that painting because
Hmm.
he was in like a similar space, right?
Wow.
He's a Green Beret, and
Hmm.
he went through all the intense training you have to do that, and it's like 10 years, man.
Wow.
And he was being deployed, and he went, he got deployed. I can't even remember where he was or what he was doing. It was like one of those things like you can't tell me, yeah, or whatever. But he got back, and he comes back, and he has like a blown out eardrum from a rocket. And he comes back, and he finds, his wife, was cheating on him while he was deployed. And he has to go through these horrible situation of divorce proceedings, which is, because, for so many reasons, but partly, in order to, or at least this is what he tells me, in order to maintain some sort of custody, with his children, he had to, get out of the service, something he'd spent 10 years developing and training his mind and body to be a benefit to. And
Wow.
he came to Utah, and he asked me to hang out with him and, help him out with some stuff. And so he came to my studio, and he just started like telling me all this stuff, man. And he was saying like this divorce is way harder than anything I've ever done. He said it was way harder than torture training or doing like a 30-pound ruck with an 80-pound pack. keeping a 15-minute mile, like all this stuff that I think sounds very, very difficult, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's super rough. And he said the emotional toll that this has taken onto him was just next level,
Hmm.
right? And and so I felt like he would be a good model because of the pressure. Maybe
Yeah.
that's kind of cruel. Maybe I shouldn't be
Well, there's something.
exploiting
No,
exploiting that, but I
there's
did want to
something that comes
capture it,
through. There's
right?
something that comes through in this painting. It is just unbelievable. I mean, as we were talking about, that I do want to get into technique, but that story and this struggle here in this relationship, I want to say this painting actually reminds me of something that had a similar emotional pull on me, and it's a painting by Tom Roberts. The title escapes me at the moment. I'll cut it into the video version of the podcast, but to Google it, to find it on Google, and just to describe this, it's a triptych, and it's settlers. The first panel of this piece is, the wife sitting there on a fallen log, and there's a camp going on, a covered wagon in the background, and then the
Yeah,
next scene is there's a little cottage and a man sitting on the log smoking his pipe, and now there's a child in the scene. And then the final is the forest has been cleared. You see the settlement in the background, and somebody years and years later is discovering the gravestone of the settlers who actually kind of broke the back of the land, so to speak. They were the first ones to settle that, develop it. It would have been a hard life. You feel this hardness coming through, but it's this struggle of this family unit, this tiny little family unit with a tiny little baby out there in the wild where it's hard trying to make this work. And even though we might not have that type of going out there and taming the land these days, quite in that respect, there is a certain element of that that I think is still with us. And regardless of what structure your family's in, it doesn't matter. Whoever's listening to this, it's not, one size fits all. That's not what we're saying. But there is something that we face that's very real. There's a very real danger to life. There's a struggle in everything that goes on with us every day, regardless of where you're at. This, I feel, comes through this painting very strong in such a heavy way. But again, I want to get into the technique, but just to point out something that I see and really appreciate about this painting, there's a harshness to everything in the image, the muted tones even, but the technique, but such a sensitivity as you pull that focus in to the face of the woman, the hands, the baby's head, the breast and the exposed shoulder, like that. It's just so beautifully, delicately painted, and then it just dissolves as it moves out from that center. So you focus in on this thing where there is this tender moment, this care, this love, and then everything out around that, chaos. It's really strong, man. It's a beautiful painting, stunning, and it's huge too, by the
well,
way. How big is this piece?
oh, it's 6 feet. It's 6 feet.
Wow,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah, I'm into big paintings right now with egg
Yeah,
tempera. I
man.
got another 6 footer I'm working on right now. It's yeah, everything you said was made me so happy that you're noticing that, because those were things that a lot of things you stated were conscious thoughts I had when I was creating it. I mean, when you said harshness and sensitivity. That's part of the egg tempura, which I gravitated towards and do quite a bit now.
Wow.
Because I've always been kind of harsh with my paintings, and my drawings, but not in like a new artist heavy-handed way, but just from a like sheer, like, if you when something is when I put a mark down, and I like scrubbing things and being harsh with things. Like, I like it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think most artists, um, wouldn't like that. But there's something about it that I enjoy. But you couple that with some training, and you can have like two seemingly opposing things meet, that can hopefully provide something interesting. And as for the narrative, yeah, I mean, the idea of like, my wife was breastfeeding, and I think I had the idea for this in the wintertime, and just that like being exposed in such a like intimate, nurturing moment, to those cold outside elements really appealed to me and spoke to me, because
Mm.
here we are, Andrew, like you have a child. Do you have a son or
Yeah,
daughter?
I've got a son. Yeah, he's about 2.5 now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you have a 2.5-year-old son,
Mm.
and you just want the world for him, man. Like you just
Oh,
want to
absolutely.
give them everything, and
Absolutely.
and um and here we are, when I had the idea for this, because from the idea to finishing was a year. The painting time definitely wasn't a year, but like just thinking about it, um and, and there's this outside harsh world, financially, like politically, everybody's at each other's throats,
Yeah.
and even spiritually to a certain degree, and just in terms of, you know we live in such a screen filled world, and there's no time to have those moments of contemplation and reflection, and connection to something other than, social media, or something else, right? To have that
Yeah.
stillness, and to think,
Yeah.
and so there's part of me that's like, just feeling so stressed with all these outside sources. I really wanted to get capture that feeling of nurture, despite these cold and hostile situation, and also the feeling of like endurance and perseverance, with a male in it, who's in the background, of like, continuing to get up and move forward
Just
no
keep
matter
on
what,
going.
and
Keep on going.
keep
Yeah.
searching, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad everything you said really hit it
Well,
on the head,
because
and I appreciate
if he doesn't, if he doesn't, then this situation, that's the thing. It's like the situation, the moment of tenderness in the middle of this painting is hanging by a thread. If he doesn't go
that.
out
Right,
there and do what he's
right,
got to do, and I'm assuming he's going out there to kill it, to drag it back, and maybe bring it
right.
over a fire, and then he's
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's the painting is utterly terrifying. It's pulling at my emotional, triggers, it's really pulling at that, but
Yeah.
it's so well done, man. So well done.
It's but after this conversation, you have to. I'd appreciate if you, if you could, if you remember that artist's name that you mentioned with the multiple paintings.
Yeah, Tom
That
Roberts.
sounded, you. Oh, okay. Tom Roberts. Yeah, you were telling me just the concept. I haven't
Yeah.
seen the painting, but I
Yeah.
started getting some goosebumps. I was like, man,
Yeah.
because I've been thinking about that stuff a lot, like the past, the present, the future.
Hmm. Hmm.
Man, that, I mean, just the description you had really spoke to me. That was, I gotta I
Yeah.
gotta check that out.
Let me pull up let me actually get the title here. Oh
Yeah.
no. Oh no, I
What?
got the art. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. This is, yeah, my fault. The paintings by, I did a Google search on Tom Roberts. I was positive it was Tom Roberts, father of Australian Impressionism, but no, it's Frederick McCubbin, and the painting's called The
Okay.
Pioneer, 1904. There's
Yeah. Let's see.
there's something about this that I think is, it's very reminiscent. It just reminded me straight away, of your painting. It reminded me of this one. Yeah, sorry for getting the name wrong, folks. I'll do that from time to time. I've got so many artists floating around in my brain. I knew it was one of the Aussies.
Oh yeah. Look at that. Okay. So I've been thinking about this all the time, man. Like,
Yeah,
because and that was another thing I started. How I was telling you, in my early 20s, when I was doing missionary service, you aren't watching TV or news or anything like that. You're just
yeah,
reading and talking to people.
yeah,
But when I talked about, like, you have so much, you have this heightened sense of overviewing your life and crawling over it. And
Mm.
one of the things I remember then, and it still sticks with me now, and I think about it fairly often, is like I would think a lot about people, you know, uh, the sacrifices people made for me to be where I am, and
Wow. Yeah.
to just be alive,
Yeah.
or at least at where I am now, and so the sacrifices that they made, and then you know the sacrifices I want to make, and
Mm.
my hope for what my you know to prep my children, right, for the future. And there is this like looking to the past, looking at the present, looking to the future. Whereas an artist, that there's something to artwork and art making where we're always doing that, right? We're looking at the past, we're looking at our peers, the present, and we have this hope for the future. And this concept here, man, you know, I
I
think there's
just
a lot. I might have to uh, steal from him in an ethical way in the future.
well, I just sent you a second painting there in the chat. Have a look at that second link. And it's
Right.
in the Zoom chat. Just click on that little speech bubble there. And this one's called Lost. And it depicts a boy in the forest, and he's proper lost. But his technique is something interesting that I think you'll really vibe with because the image just completely falls apart. Can you see
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and again, he's honed in on the figure, that sensitivity in the figure. So again, this is an Australian artist, Frederick McCubbin, and I've always loved this painting. It's in a way there's similar types of elements and things going on here with the narrative to the one that we were just speaking about of yours. But yeah, I get that too. You know, we really do stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and within our own family lines and our own ancestry, and just even culturally, we're a resilient, tough bunch. But I think sometimes we forget that. We forget about where
Yeah.
and also, like, yeah, maybe we've become weaker now, but I
Sure.
also think we could, if we had to, we could tap back into that spirit of
Sure.
perseverance.
I mean, I always, like I said, whenever I do, get nervous, I always think about, my grandfather. I mean, he was in the Depression, like
Yeah.
World War II. There's the Spanish flu, like all this crazy stuff
Mm.
that seems way harder than anything I can think of, that I've faced. But I mean, who knows? I mean, that's just my perception. I could be wrong, but I mean, he made things work and he made them happen. And I heard stories, yeah, that my dad would tell me where, I mean, he played for every congregation, right? Like,
Mhm.
just to get by at the beginning, he played for, like Baptist congregations. I heard even Jewish congregations. I don't know what a Jewish service is like if they need an organ.
Mm.
That could be wrong, but he went to like every faith, in the
Mm.
valley, and
Wow.
he was playing for them, right? Like,
Cool. Cool.
anyone who needed an organ. And my dad told me to get um to get considered for a position as the Mormon Tabernacle choir organist. He sat in front of an office for 3 days. For 3 days, just to make a pitch, right?
Wow.
I mean, like, he 3 days. You're there. I mean, I assume he went to bed or something,
Yeah.
but I mean, imagine that, right? And I 100% agree with that, man. Like, we are resilient, and we live, assuming you there's a lot of advantages to living today, right? Like, there's
Mm.
unbelievable prosperity. I mean, despite the way it feels at times, and I just kind of gave you some moans and groans, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, we're compared to other times, like, there's a fair amount of prosperity, and
Mm.
so I always think about that, and and when I'm trying to make things happen, when I'm trying to move stuff, when I'm trying to get better, um, I'm trying to be the best that I can, right?
Mhm.
And I think about my grandpa and everyone who's come before me. And this artist you have here, like he totally nailed what I think the painting title has
Hmm.
indicated. Lost. I mean, you see that boy. I mean, Andrew, you've been lost, haven't you?
Not that
Right?
bad.
Like, right? Not that bad, right?
I
I
was
mean,
lost
look
in
at
a
that.
grocery store once when I was 5. It felt a
Right?
lot like that.
You go to the lady and you find that it's actually not your mom. It's just somebody who kind of looked like her. You're like,
Yeah, and
ah,
then you freak right out. Yeah. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. But I appreciate that this I assume this artist is no longer alive,
Oh,
correct?
no, 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 no. Well and truly, yeah, artists from the
Oh,
past.
there's the 1907. I'm seeing the date
Mm,
here.
yeah.
I mean, the fact that he can speak something that from I guess that's not that long ago. It seems like a long time ago, but that message carries to today, the
Yes.
present.
Yeah.
It's kind of illustrating what I'm talking about, like
Yeah.
this dichotomy or this pull, push and pull from the past to the future, right here into the present, where we as artists have this unbelievable ability to communicate through this visual medium.
Mm,
And I love that, like I can just look at this, I can just take a visual gulp, and you can extrapolate that emotion immediately, and
yeah.
almost
Yeah.
novels of like of having been lost
Yeah.
and relating to that feeling, right? And that's what I mean, that's what I hope my work will do for others. Yeah, you talked about my bio being the shortest ever. I'm trying to improve that, partly because I am finding, like, when I explain my paintings to
Mhm,
some people, it does seem to help.
mhm.
Although I'm I'm very slow to do so. I don't enjoy doing that. I really personally, as a viewer, dig just being able to take that visual gulp and like immediately like have that I don't know, emotional memory or whatever it is come
Mhm.
to the surface. Like I love that feeling. That's what this painting just did,
Mm,
what you're showing me here, and that's what I hope. But I'm starting to come around to being more descriptive and more open, and trying to get better at explaining the emotions and feelings behind the work that I do. Because to be frank, there's not a painting that, or at least not many that I can think of that I've ever done where I didn't have a distinct reason for painting it, right? Like at least on a message I wanted to communicate, right?
right on.
And so I was starting to see, like, some people could immediately tap into it, but some people needed a little bit more guidance. So I'm trying to get better at that. I should do that on my bio too. So I guess we're all trying to get better.
Well, I mean, let's geek out about the art side of things, the technique side of things. You said something before about tempera, egg tempera. And so
Yeah.
are some of these oils and some of them are tempera, or are they virtually all tempera? Like, or we got a bit of a mix here.
Some of them are oil and some of them are egg tempera. Yeah. Egg
Right.
tempura, right?
Beg your pardon. Yeah. This is, I mean, it's just stunning. So walk me through egg tempura and
Yes.
give me the right pronunciation of that. I'm butchering it. What is it? How do you
I
say it?
pronounce it. Yeah, I pronounce it egg tempura.
Egg
Um,
tempura.
you
Okay.
know, yeah. You know, I mean, I really discovered egg tempura by just a hunch, right? I was
Right.
just looking at my work, and if you look at the oil paintings, oil's just very bold
Hmm.
and very chromatic and beautiful and colorful
Hmm.
and rich. Um, and egg tempura is fairly muted, and dreamlike, and it's I mean, it's a very old medium, right? Like
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Egyptians used it, you know, Renaissance painters used it. I mean, it is extraordinarily old, and it is essentially egg yolk and pigment. Um, uh, and I was just really drawn to that muted aspect, right? Which is funny because, you know, I studied partly with Jeff Hine, you know, who loves color. I mean,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
color is
Yeah.
all he's all about it. And I love color too, but I wouldn't say like tempera though is the same as like tonalist oil painting. It doesn't feel the same to me. It feels it really does feel like I'm drawing back into a memory where I don't know how you think about images, but when it or your dreams, but when I reflect on it, it always seems or I have the impression of like a muted color, you know, like a muted
Interesting.
color image, right?
Yeah.
And so I really dig that.
Mm.
Um, and and the harshness of the medium is quite attractive as well. But I got into it by looking at well, Andrew Wyeth is probably the one of the
Oh
most
yeah.
well-known contemporary painters who use that medium. And I mean, he was around during a time where it was really difficult to paint representationally, right? I mean,
Hmm.
he was like an island of of the modern art movement, and he was still able to get away with huge shows and significant commission work while doing representational work. Uh, and I think he really gravitate. I'm assuming, right? I think he gravitated towards egg tempera because I mean his father, you know, um, was just such an amazing oil painter, and it's
That's right.
probably his own thing, right? I
Mm.
mean, it was probably little his own little nook, right? And you know, I just tried it partly because I was looking at my work one day, and I just didn't like how in your face it was, right? It was just
Right.
very colorful and bold. And, you know, maybe if we lived in an era where there wasn't so many screens, where, I mean, there's just so many colorful, bright images in my face all the time, I wouldn't feel that way. And I definitely didn't feel that way when I was younger. And, you know, I was in these studios with all these brooding artists and I just wanted to lighten up, right? You know, I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, I was more attracted to like bold, um, colorful things. But now I really dig the dreamlike feel, and I really dig the viscosity of the paint. Right, I love how it lays down and seems to kind of match a certain temperament about myself that I feel like when I'm painting with oils, I have to kind of suppress it a little bit. Now I love oil painting a ton, and I can paint oil on top of egg tempera. Um, but I do like that this strange sensitivity and aggression, like almost uh, like a crazy person uh, level attention to detail and and kind of a nervous aggression is able to come out. Whereas when I'm painting with oils, you can't do that. It just doesn't
Hmm.
work
Hmm.
for whatever for what just because the medium's goopy, you just can't operate that way. Um, but with egg tempera, you can, and it's really is a relief. You know, and if there's artists out there who are interested in experimenting with other mediums, man, like it really. When I was younger and I was just starting to study, and I would see kind of these more amateur hobbyist artists kind of talking about materials all the time. And I was like, it's not like this certain brush. I still feel that way, but like, man, there are mediums that will dial into certain aspects of your temperament and your personality that you
That's
might
right.
not have considered that are totally out there. And I'm so
Wow.
glad that I just had the intuition to just give it a shot because nobody told me about it. It was
Yeah.
just literally a hunch. I was just seeing what I was wanting to try differently.
Yeah.
Then I was looking at these paintings that had these elements like that I liked, and I just gave it a shot, and I love it. You know, it's great.
there's an artist I want to shout out. His name's Simon Richardson. He's from I think he's still in Dunedin in New Zealand, but from what I understand, he does egg tempera as well. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. But yeah, again, I've got to actually have a chat to Simon as well at some point on the podcast. I'll have to pick his brain about what he does. But talk me through the technical aspects, okay? Just for those of us that aren't as familiar with this medium, what do you need? What's the typical setup look like for this? Run me through the technical aspects. So you got an egg, obviously. You're using an actual egg.
So at the beginning, I was using an actual egg in a little bit of vinegar and water, um, and that's great. Um, but Sommelier, they do a pre-mixed mixture, right?
Oh wow.
Which if you do, if you talk to some hardcore egg tempura um, advocates, they'll be like, that's not the real thing. That's not the same.
Mhm.
It might some call it, even give it a, egg tempura grassa or something like that. Um, but it's essentially the same thing, except it has some enamels and some preservatives in it, which you
Okay.
hear preservatives and you're like, oh no. However, I like it better, and here's why. Because with egg tempura, you always have to paint in thin layers, right?
That's right. Right.
You can't do any Jackson Pollock marks, or else you're going to get cracking. So you want to avoid it. And for me, I paint in thin layers, whether I'm using egg tempura or oil or anything else, right? It's just part of my personality. Um, but uh, but with the um, some of those enamels and preservatives, you're able to have a little bit more of a bite, right? Just a little bit more than at least what it feels like you can do with actual egg yolk. Um, and I don't know that this is necessarily true, because I haven't done an experiment, but when I am putting it down, it feels to me like there's a little bit more wiggle room with the pre-mixed egg tempura, um, that sommelier. I believe that's how you pronounce it, right?
Yeah.
Sommelier, or something like
Sommelier.
that.
I think you got it spot on.
Sommeliera.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, right? So don't
I
want to
think the
correct
first
myself.
one, bro. But yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so I like that premix
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff, really,
Cool.
because of those added ingredients, and it's not like less archival or anything. As a matter of fact,
Mhm.
I would even argue it's more so. Um,
Brilliant.
yeah, maybe, I mean, maybe that's a stretch, but I know that it's totally solid. Now, some egg tempuras painters, I can think of a few in my mind, don't like them being compared, but really the feel of the two is similar enough where you can say, I mean, it's like, I mean, on the bottle it says egg tempura.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and the thing about egg tempura is, it's this weird middle of the road between, like, I mean, if watercolor and oil paints had a baby, it would be egg tempera, right?
That's it. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Okay.
It really would. I mean,
Yeah.
and it really is brilliant. And maybe that's because there's like a slight amount of oil within that egg yolk,
Right on.
that gives it kind of that feel. But I love that it dries so quickly. A lot of
Mhm.
people hate it, mainly for transitions, right? Making transitions like a sky, having that slow, gradual transition can be difficult,
Right on.
because you're doing so many layers. But if you're the kind of person who, or kind of painter who enjoys things like optical mixing, like putting
Oh,
pieces of
I
color
love
next
that.
to each other,
I love that.
right?
Yeah.
And if you like, I like a diversity of mark making, right? So I can do things very linear. I can do things very broad,
Mhm.
and because it dries really quickly, you can get some of these cool linear marks that have a fairly sharp edge. It feels like a linear medium when you're
Wow.
working with it.
Yeah.
And man, there's just so many cool effects. And people talk about egg tempera like they have to be these small, boring, medieval looking paintings, but that's not the case at all, man. Like you
No.
can do big paintings. You
Yeah.
definitely can do big paintings. I mean,
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong,
like this one behind you, there's 6 foot.
right? Right.
Good.
And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a huge you know, technical art nerd, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like fresco is essentially egg tempera, or excuse me, like the Sistine Chapel. I believe that was essentially egg tempera mixed with like plaster, right?
I have no idea. But I mean, that'd be an interesting one to look up.
I could be totally wrong, so somebody can, just make fun of me in the comments if they
My
like.
my my
But
editor my editor Jim will cut the answer into the video version of this. So yeah, if you're listening to the audio version, well, you'll just have to Google it yourself. But
right, right. But
yeah.
the Sistine Chapel, like that's
Mm,
huge. Now the tricky thing with it is that the mark that you put down, like the value, is going to change sometimes within seconds, right? So
wow.
you have to do these value estimates and color estimates, really,
Mhm.
because it's once you put it down, it sinks in and it's going to be pretty different fairly quickly. But what happens is you get in this almost like trance-like state where you start making these educated estimates of where things are
Mhm.
going to be, to the point where, I mean, you have to be working like in a kind of methodical fashion, but to the point where you can estimate things pretty well. The other thing that's really rad, well, sorry, I should stop rambling. Did you have any, do
No,
you have
no,
any
no.
questions before I keep on geeking out here?
Okay, but no, let's keep the geek train rolling here. But there's one thing that I did want to ask you, one painting here that's just really caught my eye, and the way that you've defined a three-dimensional form with a whole multitude of these linear marks, and it's this beautiful portrait of Henry, right, on your
Yeah,
website. Now, so
thank you.
that's tempera as well. I'm taking it.
Yes.
So
Wow.
one thing I really appreciate about this is that you've got that looseness of these broad strokes in the shirt and in the background, but then these tiny little strokes with the face and then the rounding of that form, and then you honed in this beautiful sensitivity around the nose, the eyes, the mouth. Wow, incredible. And then there's this
Thank you.
awesome bit of pitted texture just below the eye where you're
Mhm.
catching a stronger highlight there. So
Yeah,
I'd love to know, please let's keep geeking out here because this is cool. I'm actually learning some stuff here. But I'd love to ask you a little bit more about this painting in particular, just kind of process techniques and that sort of thing.
please, please. So is your question about the texture, the linear marks, or is there anything
All of it.
specific?
All of it. I
Okay,
think
okay.
my big question
Let's
is
talk about
just
it all.
it's just a big bubble and it just says how you know that's it.
Well, when I explain it, it'll actually probably seem pretty simple. So first of all, when I approach a tempera painting, I'm approaching it kind of like any other painting, where I'm just trying to get the general form. Um, and I try to get that is the best I can, right?
Mhm.
As good as I can in a reasonable amount of time. Um, the linear marks are what I have described as accents, right? So where you get
Yeah.
that painting, where you get that painting to that point where it's just like it's looking pretty good, but it still needs that extra like oomph, right?
Yeah.
To take it from like 90 to 95, maybe even 100. Um, level of completion, and
Mhm.
that those linear marks are that, right? I'm still thinking about form, but I'm also wanting just that extra oomph, right? And to really get that extra turn. And those linear marks are really great because I have already developed so much form. It's almost like little desserts on the painting where I can just push it
Cool.
that one extra mile,
Yeah.
and I can also do things that are difficult, that that maybe, sometimes if I want to, bring form a little bit closer to me, maybe I'll pop the chroma a little bit, or the temperature, to get it, popping towards me just a little bit.
Mm.
But sometimes I can't really get it to the level that I want. And sometimes there's just putting that linear mark down that gives the impression of like a turn that just makes me feel satisfied. And then on top of, when we talk about the texture, right? That's another misconception about egg tempera paintings, right? If you read the book, Robert Vickery, I believe is his name. New Painting Techniques for Egg Tempera, I think is the title of the book. He talks
Excellent.
about it there, uh, and you can totally get texture on egg tempera paintings. This idea that they have to be these boring, smooth, tiny paintings is totally wrong. You have to build up the textures though. You can't just do like big globs of paint. You build them up, within reason, anyways. You build them up, but the drying time's fairly quickly, right? So like an oil painting, you have to wait like days sometimes to put on another layer, and you do need to wait a little time with egg tempera, but not days. So you can build up these textures fairly quickly on each layer, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so you can get these cool textures. You can do these linear marks, which I like when I'm thinking about it, because when I'm drawing, right, you can do almost these little hatchings, right, that can be descriptive of the form, or you can use it for a lot of different reasons. You can lead somebody's eye that you want, tell your viewer where you want them to look. You can
Mhm.
describe form. You can just put little accents of highlights or accents of color. And it's the same concept that I would use on my oil paintings. Now, if you look at my oil paintings at, are you on my website?
I
I'm
am
not.
right now. So let me ask you about Milan Jackson. Is that an oil?
Yeah, that's an
Right.
oil.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I've got that on the screen, and we'll cut it into the conversation here. So yeah, I can see that there is actually a crossover between the technique here, but beautiful
Right.
handling on that painting. Gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was a commission for well, I think he was the second generation, Malin was, who they settled Fremont, Utah.
Right.
And I think he was the second generation there. And we went out there, and I just, looked around at some landscapes, and went out with Malin himself and his son. And, they have a little tiny ranch house over there. And I was able to get the opportunity to paint him. It was very cool. But you're correct. Like there is some overlap in that technique. Whereas there, I would use kind of some optical mixing pointillism, right? Where I'm just trying to get those accents to that next level
Mm.
of turning the form, right?
That turn in a
The
form, bro. That's
turning a
wow.
form, like
Yeah.
it's just one of those things you can just get sucked into. And it just makes me so happy where when I just feel that three-dimensionality really popping.
Oh yeah.
um and it's just an
I,
addiction for
I
me.
I
I love
see
it.
this in your portrait of your grandfather, particularly. I've never seen wrinkles painted quite like that, and it really does. I mean, I can't see the original, but this is a pretty good
Well,
representation.
i
I
got
feel on
i
your.
got
Yeah, I
I got
could
the
see it.
original right
I
here.
could see it on the Zoom call. I pulled it up here on the other
Yeah.
screen, but I appreciate the wrinkles, and then the folds in the eyelids, and then that little pop of sharpness with the eyebrows over the top of some of those darker recessed shadows under the eyebrow ridge. Man alive, that is so cool. So cool. Yeah. And so
No,
I take
thank
it
you.
this is oil as well. I mean, this definitely looks like oil.
That is oil. Yes,
Right.
yes, that is. Yeah, but that same concept, right?
Mm.
I was thinking about form, so much about form. And if you look at the tip of his nose, I'm popping the chroma and the temperature to really just make that nose just come towards the viewer just a little bit more,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I'm just trying to get that three-dimensionality. And that painting was right when I came back from New York, right? And I was just trying so hard. I was just thinking about when you if you go to the GCA, there's just so much talk about form. And it was really front of mind. It's definitely served me well up to this point. But that painting was like a extra amount of scrupulous attention to form, right?
Hmm.
Um, but it was there. You can see some crossover technique, and you can see, that's leading into the tempera painting. My website. I really need to get more work on there. It has a cap of like 30 images.
Oh
I don't
wow.
know how to. I need to. It's Squarespace right there, so
Oh,
I
okay.
need to.
Okay.
I need to pump some more in there,
Well,
but
your Instagram, I mean, I guess your Instagram works as a great second portfolio because one thing we can see here
sure,
on your Instagram is progress pics. And so I want
right,
everybody right now to go to at John Darley Art. Darley is Darley, and it's all one word. And follow him now on Instagram, and you're going to see some up close and really amazing. If you want to geek out about painting, follow John on Instagram. This is cool. Like I've just got a solid image here of just a shoulder, a little shoulder action from an old painting, says John in this
yeah.
post. And what I love about this is just your use of color to define that form. I'm on to my
Yeah,
students all the time about, form is always a result of paying attention to a core group of points. We have line and shape, tone or value, color, and edge. And if you nail all of those, then you can lead to that convincing sense of form, depth, light, and material. I'm trying to drill this into them continually. Now, I don't know how they teach it at other ateliers and schools and workshops and things, but for me, that's something that I'm always thinking about. But I see that so much here. One thing I gotta say and just commend you on, because the edges. I geek out about edges, the way that
oh man,
shoulder meets that background with softness. When I first started out, and I still do this, but I see a lot of beginners doing this too, is that there's a tendency to have this razor sharp edge and not lose
yeah,
the edge. You don't need to define it so much. And here you've got these beautiful lost edges in your work. And one more thing,
yeah,
this foot that you've
oh
posted, I saw this reel of the foot from this recent painting of yours, and man, you could see all of that intricate line work, but
yeah,
lost to edges. It's everywhere. It's beautiful, man. Beautiful stuff.
oh
Love
man.
it.
Edges for me too, man. I mean, edges are. It's like whatever you do, if you're a student, whatever you do, just don't make all your edges the same, right? You want that break and that push and that pull, that interest, because I mean, maybe you can do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do, but I having interesting edges is really important to me because um, it's such a powerful tool to lead the eye and make things feel tense or make things feel round or give emphasis to a certain section. I mean, such a critical tool. Definitely. Matter of fact, I have this little study I'm doing for this. I did for this big 6 foot painting I'm working on right now. I'm not going to show you the 6 foot painting because it's a secret. Maybe I'll show you the study.
Oh, give us a scoop. Give us a
But
scoop on the podcast for the video version.
I'll,
Come on. My
I'll,
Academy
I'll, I'll
students
give
would
you.
love to see it.
I'm looking at the 6 footer, but I'll tell you I'll show you the study. I'll show you the
Okay,
study
let's do it.
because
Let's do
it's
it.
because
Do you want to
okay,
do you
all
want to
right,
grab it and bring it into the podcast?
yeah.
Oh,
I'll
fantastic.
grab
Oh,
it.
folks, look, if you're not watching the video version, what are you doing? So jump on Tish Academy and check this out.
So
We're
so
about to see a treat here.
this is like a little tiny, what is this? Like 5 by 6 study I did, one of many studies for my client for this. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 figure painting I got here. Here. Um, you see,
Oh, Struth, dude,
with the line,
look at that.
right?
Look at that.
I don't
Wow.
the colors like all purple here on and
Yeah.
it's blown out near the center.
Okay.
Um, and I'm not going to tell you the title or what it's about, but you can see.
I
potentially.
can really get a sense of some of some of these tones coming through. Very
Right here.
spiritual painting. Oh, beautiful. Wow. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. So
Awesome.
this is the sketch,
Yeah.
and I'm being all sneaky about it because I just want the finished project to be I plan to have an unveiling for this, and I want it to be a good one. But this, if you look at the edges right here, I mean they're fairly bleeding into one another quite
That's
a
right.
bit more than what you'd think, right? And a lot of people will enjoy this. Let's call it an atmospheric feel,
Yeah.
and you'll see it a lot in older paintings, and you'll like it, and and I found for myself, like I would like this thing, but I wasn't sure why I liked it, right? Until
Mm.
I started taking like a little bit closer look at some older paintings, and that atmospheric quality is what I see is something I see often missing in a lot of contemporary representational paintings today.
Mm.
Um, and it's I think it's a kind of a similar concept of like color outside, right? Like that the color of the sky, you might bring it down just a bit onto the mountains because those mountains are going to have some of that color from that sky, right? And
For
so
sure.
these edges in a space, they're often, at least in our brain, like are bleeding in one another, and our brain does so much to correct things and makes edges sharp and soft. Like I don't know if you've maybe tr- this might be me just being crazy, but like maybe you can try this as an experiment too. But like when I will look forward, like at something, and I'll try to pay attention to what's happening in my peripheral vision, and it almost seems to me like if I'm in a building like a lot of architecture around me, like those straight edges will kind of bend like a fisheye lens,
Oh
and
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think there is that that correction that your brain does to make things straight, make things sharp. But in reality, like there's so many things with our edges, with edges of objects, or but objects in general, when they are in a space, they're being influenced by other objects, by the color, by the air. And so when we think about that and get away from being too restricted, um, with our like our line drawings, like, and that's the big thing. You'll go to an atelier school and you'll do your straight line blocking. It's very important. You want to get that structure, right? You want to get that skeleton to be able to like almost sculpt on that form, right? But the danger in that is thinking that everything, not not paying attention to the atmosphere of maybe that single figure within the space, right? And so for that little study, so I'll often do these studies, and I like them a lot because they'll because they're being they're done fairly quickly. I
Mm.
get that kind of like atmospheric feel that I just love, and
Mm.
hopefully this bigger painting turns out well. I'm hoping it will, but I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about atmosphere, and I'm
Beautiful.
thinking about how these figures are being
So
portrayed
are
within
you
the.
speaking to us now? Are we coming to you now? Are you on an iPad or a mobile device or a laptop? What are we coming to you on?
Just on my desktop computer.
Oh, okay. So you can't, it's not easy to spin around.
Um, no, not for, well. I mean, I could,
Yeah.
but
Come on,
I
come
want
on.
I,
Give
I
us a
want I
look.
want to keep.
Give us a
No,
look.
no, it's just
Oh,
it's not good enough. It's not good enough. It's
I
not there.
tried. I
We're
tried,
only
folks. I tried.
we're into it, but
Okay.
I'm feeling like I
I
want to
won't
give it
pressure you. I won't
a
pressure you.
little bit more time. But
I
what?
get
Hey,
it.
I tell you this. I'll make this deal with you. Before I put anything online, I'll send you some like little detail shots that you can put on your Patreon account for
That'd be
this. If
cool.
your listeners care, yeah,
Yeah,
you'll hear it
they
here.
absolutely
You'll
do.
hear it first on Tischler's Patreon.
Oh, no, no. So Tish Academy, don't go to
or
Patreon.
or Tish or
T-
Tish Academy.
Tish
Excuse me,
Academy,
excuse me,
don't you
Tish
go to a
Tish
Patreon.
Academy.
I'm trying to
Yes.
shut that down, but I got some people that are clinging onto that site. and
Oh, there you go.
they won't join us on the news site. As I keep telling, most have jumped over, but there's just a core group of people that are staying there on Patreon, and they have no clue what they're missing. So go to Tish Academy
Yeah.
official.
Is,
Uh,
is is Patreon still rolling? Is it kind of a thing or is it kind of dying? I don't know.
Without going too far into it, because I don't want to get sued, basically, yeah, no, it's still going, and they're continuing to do stuff to it. I just found that it got a little clunky for me personally with
Yeah,
the way I run things, and we really wanted something that was that had that element of personalization. But the biggest
sure.
thing was having a place where the community could interact. Because what I used to have to do was have an external Facebook page, and that's still going, where people can go and
Hmm.
hang out and connect. But this
Right,
time with the academy, the community features are built into the academy, so you could jump over, you can watch some courses and tutorials and see video versions of the podcast, but simultaneously you can jump into these different tab features and start interacting with people on, here's my latest painting, and what art books are you reading, and
right.
get an insight as to what people are doing in their studios. So it's really cool, that ability to be able to share your work with others. So students are doing that, they're sharing their work with other
Sure.
people, and they're also able to direct message me and attach images of their paintings that they're working on. They're like, hey Tish, I'm struggling with this bit, can you help me with the sky, or give me a bit of information, or hey, I'd like to give this picture to you so you can do a video critique on this one. So
Sure.
it's pretty cool. So I much prefer the thing that we've built. We've had to build it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's way better than Patreon. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the future is, I think the middleman's going to be less of a thing as the future progresses.
Yeah, so you mentioned something there about the business side of art, and I'm looking forward to asking you about this. So you seemed a little bit excited about that. So this is cool. Let's really get into that now, because I really feel, let me just start off by saying this. I continue to feel that we still live in such an amazing time. Who knows? That could change this year, next year. There's some weird stuff going on, and the entire dynamic could change. And we saw with COVID and all that stuff about, the pandemic. Regardless of how anybody feels about what happened there, I got my own opinions. But what that did was fundamentally change the way we interact physically with
Sure.
businesses and one another. And so I had, right when lockdowns hit, I had probably, I'd say, at least half a dozen artists get in touch with me. And then over that period of time, more artists get in touch with me about how to do the online thing. It's
Hmm.
been really interesting because that forced everybody inside, right? To,
Right.
and so people started thinking, oh, shoot, I really got to
Yeah.
work on my social media. I really got to have a website. I really got to build an email list. I really got to start marketing stuff
Sure.
myself, because they're not going to the gallery now. But okay, I've said a bunch there. Let me just, we'll just bring it back. What How do you make this work as a business now? Because I notice you're teaching classes, you're
Mhm.
exhibiting some work, you're getting some commissions. Are you represented by galleries? Is that something you vibe with? How does this work now for you as a business?
That's a great question. I love that question. Yeah, so it's all of that, but there's some things that I lean into more than others, right?
Perfect.
So I've pushed towards different directions. And what keeps on happening for me is, and maybe this isn't great advice, but I have like an overall goal of what I want to do. For example, right now, um, I look at, the Slavic epics, those giant multi-figure
Oh,
paintings.
wow. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
and my dream, what I want. So if you're a collector there and you want to help me make this happen, is to do large scale multi-figure painting, right? And put it in places where it'll be seen, right? Just baseline dream, what I want to do. And so, I've had different desires and different things I've wanted to do where I was like, I want to do a big solo show. But what keeps on happening for better or for worse, maybe this is a bad thing, is I keep on just getting drawn into things that I need to do in order to financially stay afloat, right? Which was time and time again ends up being commission work. I'll start for like I've been offered some one man shows, and every time I start pursuing and going down that rabbit hole, um, I have the unfortunate and fortunate thing happen where I just keep on getting commission work where it's much more lucrative for me to pursue that path. Now, maybe that's a short-term gain for a long-term loss, but I don't really have a choice, right? Like if I were able to get maybe a few like you know maybe a few years worth of income where I didn't have to do anything other than work on a show, I would lean into that a little bit more.
Mhm.
um, but the thing about that too is that there's no guarantee, right? But I do work with galleries and they've been very good to me. I have uh, Rick Michelle Gallery has been pushing some of my work, and uh, Antiques and Fine Art in Salt Lake, which is by far the best gallery in Utah, in my view. If you go there, I mean, you're going to see. I mean, they get Norman Rockwell's in there. They get stuff from way back when. I don't know how they dig up this some of these artists, but they get a hold of it and they push hundreds of thousands of dollars of work, and they've helped me out. There's also I've done a little work with a couple other galleries with Colin Gallery, and then um, uh, 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 Cavalier Gallery has worked with me as well. And then there's a couple others, but not I'm not really heavy on it.
Mhm.
And maybe I
Mhm.
should be, but I'm not. Uh, and so, but what has been my fortune, and who knows when this fortune is going to dry up, is I always think about paintings that I want to make. And I know I'll like chew on them, and I'm
Mhm.
just chewing and chewing. Uh, and you know, I think that's important to do because when you get around somebody who might be able to make that painting happen, you have the opportunity to make a pitch, right? And there's a lot of people out there, more than you'd think, who are willing to get behind an idea, and make something happen when they're especially if they're in the situation where it's maybe the equivalent of a candy bar for their whole for expenses, right? Because what I need to survive and to operate my household and my home is
Yep.
just minuscule to what a lot of people will like actually even average investment into that investor will put into a company, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
somebody is essentially investing into my company with a guaranteed return on their investment in the form of a painting. That painting might, I believe, will appreciate. I know it will appreciate in value, throughout time. It's not a bad place to actually put your money, to be honest. Like
Not
historically, I
at
mean,
all.
it's
Yeah.
better than so many things people just
Yeah.
throw their money
Yeah.
at, right? If they get a little bit, they're like, oh, let's just throw it at this. I don't know, whatever. Um,
Mm.
so um, so for me, I've had the fortune of getting some larger projects under my belt, right? So I'll usually get, and I'm in my early 30s, right? So it seems like a lot of the other artists around here, the ones who are like 15 years older than me, like Jeff Hine, for example, I'm very envious of people who started their careers, around 2008.
Right.
It
Yeah.
seemed, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like if you started your career in 2007, 2008, you had a wave of opportunity. People were buying paintings left and right, and it was a lot easier to get plugged in. And
Hmm. Yeah.
it's, I mean, am I wrong? I could be wrong. Maybe
Well,
I'm assuming.
I think it's
It did seem like there was like a windfall of painting sales based off what other artists have told me about that
Well,
time.
let me throw this idea in the mix, because I'm reminded of my conversation with Will Patino, who's a phenomenally talented photographer based here in New Zealand in Te Anau, an Aussie guy who's really made a name for himself here in New Zealand. But yeah, so I was talking to him about this, and he came up and got, one of his photographs was bought by Apple. It was one of the screens on some Apple product way back in the day.
Yeah.
He blew up on Instagram, but he was telling me that there was a window of time where just for the social media, this thing blew up for him and for others. And so, yeah, the
Okay.
social media landscape in a sense has changed. But what I think has happened is that we there's an opportunity that presents itself. You look at the graph and there's this immediate spike in attention. Everybody jumps on and people blow up. And then you have this
Mhm.
trailing off. And then what ends up
Sure.
happening is it's not that the opportunity's gone, it's just that the opportunity's changed. And so now it's
Sure.
become a different kind of beast, and you got to work out, okay, well, what is it now? Because guaranteed there's an opportunity now. It's just a question of
Sure.
finding out what that
Yeah.
is. But one thing that I found that is really interesting, particularly about this space that we're in now, it's 2024. AI is going to continue to be a huge thing. And a lot of people were
Mhm.
losing their shirts over AI. I personally don't like AI when it comes to art. I think it could be useful in some other things, but I also, as I said in previous podcasts, I'm getting a real Ephesians 6 vibe about it. We wrestle not against
Yeah.
flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. That's just my own
Sure.
spiritual take. I'm very wary of it. Let's put it that way. But
Yeah.
when it comes to art, yes, you can punch in a few prompts. You can spew out something that looks like a reasonable image. But I think people are going to start to gravitate towards the things that are made by hand. Maybe I'm old fashioned that way, but I'm still seeing that. I'm seeing that people appreciate that value. It's like, okay, you can have a Zoom conversation with them, or you can sit face to face, have a cup of coffee, and then, when you're done with that conversation, give your buddy a great big bear hug and say, "Hey, good to see you again, pal. We'll catch up next week," kind of thing. There's difference between, physically interacting with a thing that was made by hand, physically interacting with people, sharing that value that is human through and through. And so I think
Right.
that there's going to be some interesting opportunities come up that are almost a reaction to the place that we find ourselves in. And I think that this here also, in terms of subject matter, that artists today could find a calling in that, where, a lot of us are finding ourselves in urban centers, but people that paint
Right.
natural scenery, for instance, are blowing up, that where people can bring this sort of environment into their spaces, whether it's a working space or a
Sure.
living space. So I don't know, man. I think there's a lot of opportunities
You
still out there, but
you said so many things that I was
I
like, oh man,
I
I want to
I do
like
that.
there.
Sorry.
I always no like so. Everyone in my family has this horrible habit of interjecting and interrupting people, and there were so many of that. Like, yeah, yeah, but
Oh, me too. I do that all the time. I
but
gotta watch myself on the
it's
podcast,
it's
but
it's it's a real problem. I'm trying to
yeah.
do better about with it. But so I mean, let me just take a couple of them. So you talked about you made a really good point about like maybe it wasn't necessarily easier, but the opportunity changed, right? And I
Mhm,
think that's
mhm,
very true.
mhm.
It does seem like a lot of the painters, 15, 20 years ago, did have like a lot of. It seems like gallery sales were really big, right? I mean,
For
that was
sure.
the method
For sure.
method the ladder, right?
Absolutely.
And galleries have been good to me, but I mean, not more than I have been to myself, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I outsell my galleries a ton, right? Like the amount of money I make just through me going to individuals and making a pitch or somebody
Wow.
just randomly contacting me. Like, I mean, what I just not too long ago, I got what was it? It was 30 grand from Instagram. It reached out, right? It was another 30, not the original one I was talking about, but another $30,000 commission, just like drop through Instagram, right?
Dude,
And right,
fantastic.
I mean that's crazy. And so, and I don't make like I'm not gonna. I don't want to misguide your viewers and make them think like I make a ton of money. I don't. I make enough to take care of our needs, and I want to make more.
Mhm.
But I am still like relatively early in my career, and
Well, hang
you
on a
know,
second.
Italy.
Hang on, just 1 second. I want to address that because that might be like the elephant in the room a little bit. Because when you throw a
Right.
number like that out, there's going to be a reaction with some people, and some people are going to
Sure.
go, "Well, what must be nice. Must be nice. Good for
Oh,
you, fella." But I want people to really know that once you get a commission like that at that level, it not only have you worked for it and is it well deserved, absolutely. You're paying for the well over a decade of training and a life of struggle up to this point where it's like he's here, he's arrived, boom, you arrived ages ago. Don't get me wrong, but no, and far be it, I don't want to patronize at all. I'm not, but
yeah.
this is so well deserved based on this amazing body of work and the quality that you've achieved now. But let's not get it twisted. By the time you finish that painting and you have to draw out how
Yeah.
many hours did I spend on this thing, you're making, and I do this
Right.
calculation. You correct me if I'm wrong here, but when
No,
I
you're
do the
right.
calculation, I'm like, well, I'm making as much as a plumber, or maybe
Right.
somebody that's a
Well,
skilled.
plumbers actually make pretty good,
They make pretty
or at
good
least
money,
around
but
here.
the
Yeah.
point is that you could make this in a trade, but the thing is you make this money in one hit. So now you have to be disciplined and stretch that out. Make sure you can pay that grocery bill, that power bill, all that other stuff.
Right.
So you've again, I just want to throw that in the mix because I don't want people to get it twisted. It's not like you're making that every other week. That's for a project that
Yeah.
now you got to get to work because that could be, who
Right.
knows, 3 to 6 months or however long it's going to be.
Right, right. I mean, you're totally right. And so I do a mixture of things because I also, the advice most painters are going to be given, and it's good advice, and you should probably follow it, is to do like tons of small paintings.
Yeah.
And for I'm just stubborn. I don't know what my deal is, but I want to do these big, like I told you, my goal, large scale, multi-figure paintings. Um, and so I do small paintings. But so the way it works for me, my typical year, is I'll get one or two larger projects, right? And then I'll get a handful of small projects, and then I teach. And and then if all else fails, right? Worst case scenario, my wife can do work for my brother-in-law, which is like a turn off, turn on hourly thing if like I fail in my responsibilities as a father, right?
Okay.
Like that's
Yeah.
worst case scenario, which is quite settling for my nerves. But I am the primary provider of our home, and luckily, I'm able to do that currently, which is great.
Awesome.
But I mean,
Awesome.
I have like I always keep on getting these like larger chunks, right, with a handful of smaller chunks, and then consistent income through instruction, right? Which instruction is really good for my like psychological state primarily, because other than models coming into my studio, I am not interacting with tons of people, right? And I'm not, you know, and I like talking, like I'm a social guy, like I like people.
Mm.
And so the cool thing is that I've been able to teach at Utah Valley University some classes, which has been really cool, especially because like hopefully none of my students from there are listening, but like I don't have a degree. Like I don't even have a bachelor's degree, and I'm teaching like, the job description is like you're supposed to have a master's, and I don't have even a bachelor's, even associates. I have nothing,
Wow, man.
right? So
Well,
so
your
so
art
the
is your master's degree. How about
so
that?
so, so the peeps who are who get all uh or who that kind of stuff is important to them. Like I try, like I just don't say anything, right?
Mhm.
So that I don't make them upset, but it's the truth, right? Little secret here. So you can, believe it or not, teach at a university if you have like an equivalent of experience, which is cool that they're doing that. I don't think they used to do that. Like, I don't know, but I was surprised that they reached out to me. It's very cool. So, yeah, so teaching large projects with a handful of small projects. I make enough to provide for my household. As of now, I have a little under a year work. years worth of work in the pipeline. And then after that, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going to happen. Right. And I never know. Right.
Yeah.
I'm always like living on this
Yeah.
um, unknown. Right. And so, the problem you get into, and it's a good problem to have, is, I've, I know how, I know my earning potential, and I've had like times where things kind of dried up, and I'm
Mm.
like, oh, woe is me, like, oh, I'm the worst. I was like, maybe I should just go get a real job or something like that. But then I'll look at like the potentials, and my earning capacity as a painter is way higher than what I could do elsewhere, right? Like
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
I would have to go and retool, and it's
Yeah.
it's like actually financially not worth it for me. So
Yeah.
it's like kind of a good thing. And Jeff, when I went to him,
Good
he
for
told
you,
me,
man. That's awesome.
he's like, if you have a plan B, you're gonna take it, right? Like you're gonna take it. It's way too hard. If you have a plan B, you're probably gonna take it.
I
And
like that. Yeah.
maybe I don't recommend that advice. I don't know, but I definitely do understand what's being said there, because like
Yeah.
there's been those times where you become very insecure or unconfident in your abilities, partly out of situation. But then I look at the math and I'm like, this is the best place for me to be. Is
Yeah.
continuing to do what I'm doing, right?
Mm.
Speaking of phones, right? Like distractions, and you're talking about AI and like this whole weird world we're
Oh,
living in.
dude.
Like,
Yeah.
dude, look
Yeah.
at this is what I'm packing here, right? This is like a calculator, right?
So what's it called?
Like,
Is it Go Light? What's it called?
yeah, it's called the light phone, right?
Light phone.
Check it out.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
It just has like calls, text, and GPS, and then you can like upload music and podcasts.
Okay.
So podcast, music,
Yeah.
but no social media, no scrolling, and I like it just because after when I first got it, you get that little bug to like just start scrolling, but after
Oh,
a while
it's dangerous.
you just like forget about it, man. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know you get over it, and so now, and I still have like my iPad with all that stuff, but I think it's good to be intentional about it, right? And so
For
this is me
sure.
playing psychological warfare with all those marketers, psychologists, biologists, tech people who are uh, putting unbelievable amounts of money trying to get you looking at that rectangle while your life goes by. And the big thing about that is like creativity. Every creative impression I've had, or thoughts I've had for a painting, have been when I'm thinking, not when I'm scrolling, right? And so that time of being bored or just like letting your mind wander, I think is crazy important. And I think moving forward, like there's like even the high school around here, I heard rumors that there's like a Luddite club or something like that. Like there's a pushback to that stuff. So to your point about like the age of AI, I definitely think there's something to that, right?
Yeah.
Um, I can't remember what we were talking about before I got some
Well,
disruptive classical music.
that's
My
all right.
bad.
I love that. And in fact, I'm making a note of that because what you said there is so important. I get a lot of inspiration just looking at my buddies from around the world and what they're creating, and also it's been
Yes,
an amazing opportunity to connect with people because
motivation.
we connected through Instagram,
Right,
and I've met several people that I call friend now,
right,
through just social media, but it's important. Again, I've said this. I sound like a broken record. I know, folks, but I have social media be part of your business plan and use it, but don't have it use you. Don't go
right,
scrolling unless it's for something particular. One thing I do like though is just in some moments here and there, you hit that little magnifying glass, you have a look at some of the art that's being produced today. I find a lot of new artists that I like to follow just by that little search feature. But you're not searching any old crap. You're just scrolling through some really cool art. And you're like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I like that. Oh, that water is exceptionally well painted. Who's that? Okay, let's follow. You know,
right.
Renato
Yeah,
Machulo,
it's
done it
motivating.
again.
Right.
Yeah, exactly,
No, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I think the point is just being intentional, right?
Yeah,
Because I
Yeah.
I love seeing a good painting on Instagram. I love
Mm,
seeing what other people are working. That commission I was telling you about, right? That was through Instagram. And
awesome.
it's a huge tool. Matter of fact, I just got an email yesterday from, I appeared in like some news story, and I have more another portrait commission, right? Like, and that's how it happens. Like, I get these emails for work. Um, and people read about you and they see you, and that's a huge marketing tool. However, in my like day-to-day life, like when I'm with my kids or I'm thinking and I'm pondering, you know, I, I don't know about you, but like I have to take precautions, or else those like, marketers and people who are making these incredibly amazing and attractive technology, I'll get sucked into it. Like I
Mm,
will.
yeah.
And so I have a dumb phone, right? And so when I'm on social media, it's when I'm working, or when I'm in my studio and I'm like, oh, I need to respond to that email. Or if I'm like gonna just like look at artwork, it's like an intentional moment in time, as
Beautiful.
opposed to just like losing 20 minutes or 30 minutes or even an hour, right?
Right.
Like it's an hour, you can cover a lot of ground on a painting in an hour, or a fair
Oh
amount,
yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
valuable.
Well,
It's
you
valuable.
could paint 3 or 4 lines in an hour, I'm sure, on one of your egg tempera paintings.
Right, yeah, we could
Maybe,
get there.
maybe.
Yeah, maybe, right. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man, I've
So
so enjoyed this conversation, man. This has been a real blast.
yeah, thank you, thank you. Hey, so before you sign out here,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hey, if you ever want to come to Utah, man, let's just do a house swap, right? Like I'm here in Utah. Like maybe I would love to go to New Zealand. My grandfather and grandmother were missionaries in New Zealand, and dude, I would love to
Oh
go to
wow, cool, man.
based
Well,
off
there's
just based
only
off what I know, I mean, which is very little, but I hear it's unbelievably gorgeous.
there's only one problem with that idea is that we'll miss each other, and I kind of want to hang out and geek out about painting. So
Oh,
why don't
that's
I
true.
just come to Utah sometime and then you come on down to New Zealand? How about that?
Oh, that
Um,
that sounds that sounds prime. That sounds
but
great.
yeah, man, not only do you have an incredible landscape in your state, but as you said, you're there, but there's a whole bunch of really great artists in Utah that are just smashing it, like really great painters, great sculptors. So, it'd be really cool. Well, we'll see what the world does here. I did say a while ago, I've had all sorts of requests and things from people like, come travel, do an artist residency here or whatever. And I kind of feel like my traveling days are behind me. I don't know. I'm a little bit more wary of travel with everything going on, but
Well,
I mean, not that I'm scared of it or anything. I just thought, I kind of want to focus on the home front for a while. But you're tempting me, so I think we might have to do something. You know.
yeah, well, if you ever do want to do a long stretch, I'm 100% positive we could get you and your family plugged in somewhere around here for for free 99. We could get you a place to stay, and you could do some landscape painting. It'd be rad. There's some really wild places around here
Cool, man.
that it's a cool place, so, and it would always be cool to meet the famous Tischler himself in the flesh, right?
Ah, yeah, right. He gets super annoying after a while. Just word of warning. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He just
Hey, wait,
doesn't
real
shut up.
question. One more question though for you.
Of course.
On the business side though, like,
Yeah.
so I primarily make my income a little bit through galleries, mostly from commissions,
Mhm,
and then through, that I guess you could call it the investor pitch, right? Where, I'm fortunate to have had a handful of opportunities to make pitches to people, and they've
mhm,
wanted
mhm.
to get behind projects, that kind of thing. But for you, you sell, where do you sell, through galleries, or is it online in instruction?
Well, really good question. So for me, the primary income is well, it's kind of split right now, actually, 50-50 between my online teaching and original sales. But I originally was showing in galleries. I had some galleries representing me over in Australia. I had a few opportunities here and there to maybe make something happen abroad, but that never panned out. Now I'm really self-represented. I might play the gallery model at a later date. You know, never say never. But really, I just find that I like personally interacting with the people that are buying my work.
Yeah,
And the other thing I really like about that, you know, sue me, but I like keeping all the money. So you know,
right.
giving away a commission, like the gallery is absolutely valuable if that's the mode. You know, they do a great work for the commission that they're paid. You got to make sure it's a real value for value relationship. But I personally find that it's no biggie for me to just take care of that business side of things because we do all of that in house. Like my wife Rachel, she's super organized and she's on the business side of things. So I can have a negotiation, talk with the client, and then I can immediately say to them, Rachel will be in
Yeah,
touch with all the paperwork and the invoice and all
yeah,
that stuff. And then, you know, we kind of play that role, that dynamic together. So for me right now, the gallery doesn't make sense, except I will be, God willing, opening my own gallery again. Because
yeah,
I'm taking over the old building again where I used to have my studio down in Lawrence. Maybe by the
yeah.
time this is out, I might even be down there at this point. Because there's always a bit of a lead time with these podcasts. So as of this conversation,
Sure.
we haven't moved down yet. We're moving down in March this year, 2024. So yeah,
That's
I'll
rad.
be getting back into that space. And you know, it's a little small sleepy town, but the advantage there was we got all of that tourist traffic and a lot of the national traffic on their way between Dunedin and Queenstown, and that area of Otago and the Lakes District was a really well visited place, but you're in the heart of this incredible landscape. It's a farming town, it's a farming community, but we got a ton of friends down there, and it's just a great spot to raise our son. It's a really quiet part of the country, and the
Awesome.
town's nice and little. It's not too big, but the next major city, Dunedin's only an hour away. So yeah, so in terms of the business side of things, that really made sense to go back there, reduce our overheads, open that gallery back up again, get back into that big old studio, start producing some big works. So I think this next year is going to be a real combination of original sales, running my online academy, selling some courses and tutorials online, and then maybe some prints as well. I want to get the prints up and running again. Because I find artists like Mark Maggiore quite inspiring. The way he does his
Yeah,
editions, limited editions, like that guy's worked out a way to make this. I mean, not only is he a phenomenal painter, but there's something about getting his art out there, sharing it with people at a lower price point with his prints, that I'm convinced that that's had an effect with the original side of things, and that we all saw that auction, right?
yeah, right.
You know,
Yeah,
that
no, that's totally true.
phenomenal,
Yeah,
phenomenal.
I
And
mean,
at this point, my camera just cut out, so we're going to switch to John, and you won't see me anymore, folks. So my video just cut out, but yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
yeah, I mean, I've never done prints, but well, with a like few exceptions, but yeah, I've thought about the same thing. It sounds like a lot of artists are kind of doing a similar thing in a various, maybe a little bit different orders. I don't know any artist like that is around me that's just 100% making their living through a gallery. Do
Hmm.
you? I mean, I don't know one. Um, I maybe that's because
100%.
the
100%
economy
no,
shifts.
no, I don't think so. Well, I don't know if it's, I think you can. I think you absolutely can.
Sure,
But
sure,
I think that there's so many opportunities now because I mean the whole nature of social media is it's very social, but there's so many opportunities
right,
now for you know, adding another string to your bow, so to speak. And I think
right,
that's been very attractive for not only artists but people who are creative and slightly entrepreneurial, whether you're a writer or a blogger, a photographer. One
right,
thing I found that naturally a lot of us artists are gravitating towards is it's not only creating those originals, but it's also teaching what we do. You know, that's
right.
become,
That's so
yeah,
so exciting. It
yeah.
fills you up, man. Like I
Oh, for
love it.
sure, for sure. for sure.
you learn so much selfishly. Like you learn a ton, right?
Oh,
And so
I learn
you
more than anybody when I teach. I'm like, oh,
right,
I
right.
just heard it again.
Extra added bonus. It's very cool,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I was talking to I was even talking to Jeff. I mean, he's not doing any gallery work, and I was talking to my neighbor. He has like a handful of galleries, and he's like, I can't find if there's a gallery that can outsell me, like I'm all about it. And so I'm just seeing this common thread, and there's this part of me that feels like I mean, I do have work in galleries. I mean, showing and I do have like sales through them, but like the huge majority is like private commission. And there's this weird part of me that feels like this imposter syndrome. I'm like, if this isn't supposed to be like the way it is, right? Like what
Mm.
are, you feel like the traditional model is, the way it is supposed to be. And maybe, I mean, maybe what I'm doing is fine. I don't know, but I love what you got going on here with the podcast. You got all your fingers in all these different pies. You're making it
Well,
happen.
I
I
will
mean, it's
say
so cool.
I don't make any money with the podcast. I
No,
don't,
I
not at
know,
all.
I
Yeah.
know you don't. I know you don't. But guess what? Guess
Yeah.
what? Like I learned about you through your podcast,
Oh,
right? I would
wow.
have
Okay.
known. Like no, well, I learned about. I first listened to your podcast, and then I found you on Instagram,
Oh,
right?
cool.
And so I mean, I wouldn't have known of this awesome artist on the other side of the planet had it not been through this medium, right? And
Fantastic. Oh, cool.
it's not just like me discovering you like on Instagram. You're like follow, but it's actually me getting to know you, like me listening to you. I listened to a bunch of these, and like before you even met me, I felt like I kind of knew you a little bit, right? And that's an incredibly powerful and interesting tool for
Yeah,
because a lot of times people are they're buying a beautiful work of art, but they're also, I mean, they're buying an artist's life, like a part of their
absolutely,
life,
man. Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so I mean, and if you don't like the artist, like it can be a beautiful painting, but you're also just like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but and so for it's I think it's a powerful tool to be able to connect with people through this medium that you're using and are putting the work and effort behind. It's very cool.
Man, I love it. I absolutely love it. And again, just to kind of reiterate what we're talking about as well, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on, a lot of interesting opportunities in a way that we can make it work ourselves, Yeah, not to shame the gallery model. I mean, if people are in that
No,
zone, fantastic. But you can really in this day and age, 2024, make it work yourself for yourself.
right.
Yeah.
And look, if there's a gallery out there who's super stoked about my work
Mm,
and like just aggressive to push it, and there has been, right? Like
mhm,
even if you're even if a gallery gives me the impression that they're unbelievably excited about the things I'm making, and some of them have.
mhm.
There was one gallery in New York who I'd never even heard of, and they emailed me, and I kind of ignored it, but they kept on being persistent and were very gracious and kind, and giving me the impression that they were very excited, and I gave them work, right?
Wow.
And like that kind of thing I'll definitely go for. But I had a gallery one time say to me like they were trying to get me to do something, and they're like, you want to make me happy, don't you? And it just kind of turned me off. Where I want somebody who I want to be respectful to them and support them, but and I would hope that there's a symbiotic relationship in any
Yeah,
partnership,
for
right?
sure. For sure.
So yeah.
Hmm.
So if you're a gallery out there and you're cool, feel free to contact me. And if
Paul
you
John.
aren't, then don't.
Not cool galleries need not apply. There you go.
Need not
Uh,
apply.
John, this has been so much fun, man. Thank you so much for being on the Creative Endeavor podcast. I'm going to let people know as I wrap up the show with my little outro that I tack on. I'm going to let people know where they can find you on your website and on Instagram. But is there anywhere in particular you'd like people to connect with you?
No, not really. I pop on Instagram once in a blue moon,
Okay.
And I try to be active. I'm not, when I have something to say or I need to, get in contact with somebody. But if you want to ask me a question directly, or if you're interested in any of my classes or my paintings or any questions at all, just send me an email at johndarley801@gmail.com. You can, send me a message on Instagram. I might be a little bit longer getting back to you, but I'll get back to you, and I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect.
This is a great place. So if you're listening to this podcast, I want to hear from you.
There you go. There you go. Well, thanks, John. Really appreciate your time today. And thanks so much again for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it, and let's chat again.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast, and a huge shout out. Thank you to John Darley for joining me. He can be found on his website at johndarley.com, JOHNDARLEY.com. I'll link that down below, along with his Instagram at John Darley Art. That's all one word, at John Darley Art. Follow his amazing work there, and I know you're going to be blown away. This guy is really inspiring. I'm continually amazed by his posts and the quality of his work. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, then please do me a huge favor. Leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. It makes a huge difference to the show. And also, while you're at it, if you could do me a solid and share this on your social media. Let other people know where you're hearing the Creative Endeavor podcast and what's inspiring you while you sling that paint. Okay, and one more thing. Now that you've listened to the audio version, hey, if you want to see the video version or the video version of any other podcast, then you can find that right now on Tisch Academy. Simply go to tisch.academy, TISCH.academy, and it'll be there in the podcast library waiting for you next time you want to get inspired. I'm going to get out of here and get back to painting. Thanks so much for hanging out with myself and John here in the studio. I'll see you again in another episode of The Creative Endeavor.